So since we're in the pre-season of season 1 of Midnight, I think a lot of people are just trying to level up as many characters as they possibly can right now because there's not much gear to be had on your mains, and we still have a little bit until season 1 where you can actually start to gear up your characters. So in this video, I want to go over what I think is one of the best, easiest, and most efficient ways to go about leveling up new characters. This is also going to be a pretty simple method, so it's not going to be some like speed running of the main campaign or anything like that. This is specifically going to be for leveling up alts, and it's going to be quite simple but also pretty efficient. Now, the one and only prerequisite is to go complete the main campaign on one character. So whether it be your main or whatever you want to play first, go through the main campaign, get that first character to level 90, because you will need some of the portals to some of the later zones that you normally wouldn't have unlocked. Also, if you're trying to level up new characters, you don't want to have to keep going through and doing the starting scenario when you could just complete the main campaign and then skip that on all of your alts. And then once you've done that, you can bring that alt character to Orgrimmar, Stormwind, or Dornogal, talk to Lady Liadrin, and she will have a skip that'll take you right to Silvermoon, skipping the introduction scenario, and then you can start your leveling journey there. But before we get into some of these actual methods, I want to go over some of the experience boosts you can get, because there are actually a few you could possibly get right now that'll pretty heavily increase your leveling speed. So first off, you have PvP mode. If you're doing anything in the open world, this will give you a 15% increase to pretty much any experience you could be getting. This includes quest turn-ins, defeating enemies, even using your gathering professions. All of that experience will be buffed up. Now, if you're doing something that's going to have a lot of players around, like if you're trying to do any events or anything like that that could have a lot more players, you may want to just skip that, because if you're just dying to PvP a lot, you're not going to be getting a bunch of experience. But for the most efficient leveling methods in the open world, you're probably not going to be around a ton of other players normally. Then for number 2, you have the experience boosting achievements. So once you get a character to level 90, you'll get the first of this achievement, which will give all of the other characters on your account a 5% experience boost up to level 90, and this stacks up 5 times. So let's say you're on your 6th character, you have 5 other level 90s, that will be the max amount of bonus experience you can get from this, which would be 25%. So every new character you get to level 90 will make your next one even faster, up to those 5 first characters. Then everybody else would just have the 25%. That is a massive experience boost for literally anything you're doing in the entirety of the game. So I would definitely recommend you stick to leveling up one character until you get it to 90 and then jump to the next character. Don't start a bunch of characters, get a few levels, and then jump to another one. You want to go 1 to 90, another 1 to 90. And then finally, the Dark Moon Fair is currently active. So you can go to the Dark Moon Fair, get on the ride, and pick up your 10% experience boost that lasts for an hour. Now, if you don't want to keep going back to the Dark Moon Fair and you have some of the Dark Moon prize tickets, you can also pick up these hats at one of the vendors for 10 of the prize tickets, which isn't very much. And these hats are items that will be in your inventory that you can use whenever you want, that will give you the 10% XP bonus from the Dark Moon Fair, but you can just use it anywhere you want. Now, these don't work when the Dark Moon Fair isn't active, but let's say you're out leveling up and you don't want to go back to the Dark Moon Fair and your buff runs out, you can just have a few of these hats on you, pop one, you're good to go for another hour. Just keep in mind you do lose this buff if you die, so try not to die, or you may have to go back to the Dark Moon Fair for that additional 10%. But this is a decent bit of bonus experience you can get right now, even with it being the start of the expansion. And then we have the leveling methods. Now, some of these will be optional. You kind of choose if you want to do all of the parts of these methods. But the first one is going to be to craft some of the very cheap initial crafts for some professions. Now, I know tailoring seems to be the easiest one for this. And outside of that, I'd recommend picking up either blacksmithing or leatherworking to do these crafts. You can pick up 2 of these professions. You can get 1, or you can skip this stage. But this will give you quite a lot of experience. And essentially how this works is the first time you craft something with any crafting profession will give you a decent chunk of experience. It seems to be a little bit more than a quest turn-in, and the experience amounts seem to be a bit more than like a main story quest turn-in. So it's quite a lot of experience, and I know specifically for something like tailoring, for probably like 1,000 gold, maybe less, you can do all of the easy initial crafts until you get to the last section that are all super expensive crafts, and that will give you a good chunk of a level just doing that. Now, if you want to spend a lot more gold, I'm pretty sure you can still do the method, do all the cheap initial crafts, and then drop that and pick up another one and go through all of the different crafting professions, and you should still be able to do that and be getting experience off of all of those first crafts. Some of the crafting professions, especially something like alchemy, is much worse than something like tailoring, so some of them aren't even worth doing, but that's probably more for someone who wants to spend more gold, because you're going to obviously have to keep buying more and more resources to do this, and it could be boring. So I'd say if you want to keep this a bit more simple but still do some of this, pick up like tailoring and maybe one other crafting profession and do those, and then start some of the other methods of this leveling journey. Now, the next thing you should be doing is going and completing all of the 8 delves in Midnight. So there's 2 delves for each zone. This is also one of the main reasons that you want to go complete the main campaign on one character before doing these methods. And when you enter all of these different delves, make sure to pick up the quest at the start of the delve. Every single one of the delves, no matter what story variant it's on, will have a quest at the start, and these quests are just to complete that delve. These quests will give a ridiculous amount of experience, and you're going to want to do these at lower level because you're generally getting weaker as you level up, so you want to be able to do these delves at your lower level so they're much easier. Now, after you've completed those delves, you are not going to be turning in the quests. You are going to be saving all 8 of these delve quests until around level 88, because once you get to, let's say, level 88, you could go and make sure to have PvP mode turned on. You could go get your Darkmoon Fair buff, and you can go turn in all 8 of these quests and get massive experience boosts for all 8 of the quests. Now, I think the 2 that you actually turn in Silvermoon City don't get the PvP bonus because it's technically a sanctuary area, so PvP isn't enabled, but all 6 of the other quests should get that PvP bonus. And I specifically went and did this at level 88 on a character with all the XP buffs active. I only had it 10% on the achievement buffs, so you could also get an additional 15% experience depending on how many characters you have at max level. But all of these quest turn-ins with the 10% for my achievement, the 10% for Darkmoon Fair, and the 15% from having PvP turned on, these were giving me a little bit under 105,000 experience. Now, turning all these in at the start of level 88 got me all the way through level 88 and got me about 60% of the way into level 89. So this won't give you the last 2 levels, but it'll give you a majority of it. And I would still recommend at level 88 to go turn all of these in. You don't want to spend additional time leveling up and then go turning these in too late, and then you're level 90 before you turn in a few of these quests. So get all of those delves and quests done at the start of your leveling journey, and then once you get to the end, go turn them all in for massive experience gains. But there's a lot of leveling to do in between doing all of those starting delves and starting profession crafts, and then turning all of the delve quests in once you're level 88. Now, at this point, you can pretty much do whatever you want. There's a bunch of stuff you could do that will help progress other parts of the game or your whole account. Like, you could take this time while leveling up different characters to choose one zone on one character and just go do every side quest of that zone, because that'll give you a bunch of renown. Maybe you're trying to get the champion track pieces of gear for all the renowns. That's a really good way to do it. You could choose to just go do every world quest on the map on that character. You could choose to just dungeon run your whole way up to level 88. You could choose to have double gathering professions and just run around and get from like level 81 to 88 just gathering herbs and ores. So realistically, it's just what you want to do at this point. Now, if you're just trying to most efficiently level up, I think there's 2 good ways to go about this for most playstyles in the game. First off is just spam running dungeons. This one's going to be good for absolutely everything. For DPS, you're going to have longer queues, so maybe do some like questing or something else while queuing as a DPS, but healers and tanks will have really quick queues. Dungeon running is always super good. You'll also keep getting decent gear, and you'll learn the dungeons for once we get into Mythic Plus if you want to do that. But then there is also a really good method through AoE mob grinding in one of the delves, specifically one of them in Voidstorm. Now, there's kind of 2 different ways you'd be farming this because of the story variants. One of the story variants of this delve can be done on DPS or tanks pretty easily. I farmed this delve all the way up to level 90 on a DPS ret paladin. Some DPS may have a harder time. All the tanks can do these farms much more easily. So if you're trying to be a healer, maybe just dungeon spam. If you're a DPS or a tank, this one story variant is good. And if you're more so a tank, the other two story variants are also very good for AoE mob grinding here. This will also be really good for making gold if you pick up tailoring and go into the more cloth drops specializations, but I do want to keep this a bit more focused on leveling. Now, this delve you're going to be looking for in the Void Storm is called Shadow Guard Point, and there's 3 different story variants. There's Stolen Mana, Calamitous, Captured Wildlife. Now, you're going to be farming Stolen Mana and Captured Wildlife in the exact same way, in that you're essentially just going through and pulling the entirety of the delve. It's an essentially open world delve, so you can mount up, pull everything in the delve, group it all up, AoE it down. That will give you like 10 to 11% of a level every single time you do that. It'll take like 4, maybe 5 minutes if you're a bit on the weaker side. This is more specifically for tanks, because if you're trying to pull this whole delve as a DPS, you may have issues surviving, especially at higher levels. So I would generally recommend those 2 story variants to more be farms for tanks. Or if you want to try with a group, you could do that as well. But the Calamitous story variant of this delve is the one you may have heard about, and that's because you're only pulling the starting portion of the delve, and you'll see footage of all these routes I'm taking. But this Calamitous story variant, you are only pulling the starting portion of the delve, and that's because there are like 7 different elites in this small area, and the elites in here are much weaker than normal elites in the open world, so you could kill them quickly, and they still give a lot of experience. So just doing this starting portion of the delve on this story variant gives you like 9 to 10% of a level, but it only takes like 3 minutes or 3 minutes and 30 seconds compared to the 4 to 5 minutes of pulling the entire delve, and it gives a very similar amount of experience. So all you're doing in either of these farms is, if you're in Calamitous as a DPS or a tank, you're grouping up the enemies at the start of it, you're AoEing them all down, right-clicking your portrait, leaving delve, entering back in, rinse and repeat. Doesn't have any lockouts. If you're doing Stolen Mana or Captured Wildlife, I would generally recommend you be a tank. You group up all enemies in the entirety of the delve, AoE them all down, and then leave the delve and re-enter. And doing this farm on any of the story variants is actually some of the best experience in the game. Calamitous may actually be the fastest way to level up right now, so that version is incredibly strong, and the story variants cycle every day, so it just depends on what day you're leveling up. So maybe if you're leveling up like a DPS and it's not on Calamitous, maybe go level up doing something else until the next day, and then you can do Calamitous on that DPS. And that's pretty much all of the main methods I have for this leveling guide. There's also some other stuff you could do. I want to keep this one a bit more simple, but let's say you're leveling up through doing open world content. You can also go start the prey system and just choose the zone you're trying to level up in to have the prey active there. So when you're doing world quests or picking up treasures or doing anything else, you will also be progressing prey to get to that boss, which will be another turn in for what's essentially another quest turn in for a bunch of additional experience. So there are some ways you can more optimize this, but I did want to keep this guide a bit more simple. So those are pretty much all the steps I have for you. These are, in my opinion, pretty much the best ways to level up right now, especially if you're not trying to do like speed runs through the main campaign or something like that. These, I think, are the most simple and easiest ways to go about leveling up new characters that are also still going to be as efficient or more efficient than any other method. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.